Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Guided Meditations and More. My name is Ade Richardson and this is normally a 8 a.m. Eastern Time meditation, but we've also been doing interviews with spiritual teachers and seekers and other people on the path who come on to discuss a little bit about their journey. Today I have the great pleasure to have a discussion with Reverend Victoria J Thomas, who is a agape minister, and she's going to share a little bit about shadow work. So welcome, Victoria.
Good evening, afternoon.
So I'm just going to start off and by the way, if you have any questions or comments for Reverend Thomas, please feel free to leave them in the comment section of this video. If there is time, she may be able to answer some of the questions. So I'm just going to read a little bit of your bio, if that's okay. So Victoria J. Thomas is an ordained agape international minister, an inspirational speaker, teacher, spiritual counselor, and energy and sound healer and writer. She currently serves as the spiritual director of Agape Hampton Road Spiritual Center in Virginia Beach. Victoria inspires and empowers through her workshop and classes in communities throughout Southern California and now Virginia. She speaks powerfully on a variety of topics such as self-care, addiction and recovery, and I want to talk a little bit more about that area. The shamanic initiation and vocation, conscious parenting, spiritual healing, forgiveness, the art and science of affirmative prayer, and science and spirituality. She awakens in herself and others a greater self-love and embodiment of the indwelling presence of light. Victoria has led support groups at the Women's Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles, teaching spiritual principles and practices to the incarcerated. Prior to entering the path of ministry, she co-facilitated drug awareness classes and taught parenting classes. As a member of the Agape International University faculty, she developed and teaches Prayer Warrior, one of the prerequisites for those individuals on the road to Agape licensed spiritual practitioner studies. For over 12 years, Victoria led Agape International's wholeness and visitation team, serving individuals who are facing illnesses through prayer support, hospital and in-home visits, and leading a support group for each month to teach truth, principles, and affirmative prayer technology. Victoria is currently writing her new book, Prayer Warrior, Heal Yourself and the World Through the Renewing of Your Mind. So that's an impressive bio. So let's start a little bit. Why don't we start with describing for our audience, those who are not familiar with the Agape spiritual movement. Can you talk a little bit about what that's about?
Sure. Thank you for having me on, Ade. So Agape Hampton Roads Spiritual Center is an affiliate of Agape International Spiritual Center, which is located in Los Angeles, California, founded by my teacher, Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith. And its lineage comes from New Thought. New Thought was termed in the 19th century, mostly out of, known as the father of New Thought, Phineas Quimby. He studied a lot of Alan Mesmer, where the word mesmerism comes from. And he was a healer through the mind, mostly understanding that individuals can heal by getting down to a root belief system that might be causing some kind of inner conflict in the mind body, and dissolve that belief system and have a healing. And from him, Mary Baker Eddy was one of his patients. She started Christian Science, and she started the first practitioner college, and really became her own thing through Jesus Christ. She really was healed. She healed herself through the New Testament and her understanding of the Christ. And from her, many teachers, Emma Curtis Hopkins, and Emma Curtis Hopkins taught a man named Ernest Holmes. New Thought also encompasses unity. If you've ever heard of a unity church, or the Unity Religious Organization, Ernest Holmes founded Science of Mind. So agape, unity, science of mind, these are all under the umbrella of New Thought. New Thought, ageless wisdom. And so in agape, we have principles and practices that we follow, and they are universal principles. So it doesn't matter what religion you bring, all are welcome at agape. And the principles that we are embracing are that there's really only one unified field, and you can call it God, or you can call it the divine matrix, or the quantum field, or the unified field theory. Yeah. It is a presence that is everywhere in its fullness. It is the only presence, and it is the only power, the only causation, and that it is in integrity with itself, and that it created everything out of itself. And that includes you and me and anything that we see. And so other principles that we live by is that, so we are innately one with this, and any other sense of separation is simply that, a sense of separation. And that the senses and the perception, that's really non-causal, but it is going to be what causes us to have our own experiences and our own paradigms, is our perception. So the principles that there is only one power, and we are one with this power, and that it is our responsibility to unfold our soul, to grow, to awaken our awareness and our perception beyond the five senses, so that we can see beyond what the eyeballs see, beyond what the mind does with the data that the eyeballs see. The mind will always categorize, delete, edit, deflect, so that it can fit a paradigm. Yeah. And so it is upon us, it's part of the practices and the principles to begin to awaken. I like one of the terms my teacher says is that much of humanity is dimensionally challenged. There are multiple dimensions, and it is upon us to grow beyond this third dimension and grow our ability to perceive what is real in back of what is being perceived with the senses. Yeah. And that is a power and a presence that is for itself. That is an ever unfolding good, which leads me to the next principle, that everything is always unfolding. It's an expanding universe, and it's for itself as non-duality, as non-dual good. And so these are basic principles that we root in, that we found, we ground ourselves in, and it's important to do every day, because this world of form, this world of duality is always coming at us. And of course, we have a hook in it because most of us are identified as our body and as our roles in our families and, our relationships and, race, everything. We have identity. We have personality here. We have a foot in this world. And so it's upon us to grow our awareness of our true identity. And we do that through practices: meditation, affirmative prayer, communion, fellowship, sacred study, tithing. These are all the practices we do that cause us to stretch ourselves beyond our own sense of limitation.
So one of the questions that comes up when we talk about duality and non-duality and the journey back to the source, who we are, essentially, we're always that. So why this sense of separation to begin with? It seems like, almost like a game of hide and seek. Why this, what gives birth to this feeling of separation, this duality? And I'm guessing that the same source that is putting inside of many of us, this desire to come back home, that same desire is coming from this source. So why begin with having this feeling of separation in the first place? So, and taking on this identity and this personality and everything else that comes along with it.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful, deep question. Couple things come to mind when you ask that. One is a great book I highly recommend everybody get or watch. It's called The Little Soul in the Sun by Neil Donald Walsh. And it's a child's book, but it explains it so beautifully of why, if we are one with God, if everything is already inside of us, because we are inside God and there's no boundary between those two things, if we are all love, if we are all joy, if we are all abundance, what's the point? Why would we want to be in a body and experience anything opposite of that? And he explains it really well, that there's this little character called the little soul, and he says to God, I really I want to experience love. And God says, well, you already are love. And the little soul says, yeah, but I want to experience it. And he says, but you already are it. And so he says, okay, if you want to experience what you already are, we'll have to create a little shroud so that you are pretending and you're not remembering what you already are, so that you can experience the contrast and then play the game of becoming what you already are. Anyway, the book goes on and on. It's beautiful. And the little soul realizes that, part of experiencing love means he has to experience what forgiveness is. And so God says, well, you're going to need somebody to help you with that. And so the little soul chooses his very best friend, his soulmate, to help him with that. And the soulmate says, well, I don't want to do something, I don't want to go and play a game and play a role where I'm a bad guy. And the little soul begs his best friend, please, 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 you're the only one that can do this. I need you to do this. And so the best friend says, all right, I'll do it. And just as he's putting his mask on, he says, but you have to promise me that you're going to remember who I am, because I'm going to be playing my role so well, I will probably forget. And the little soul says, oh, of course I'm going to remember. That's the whole point of us doing this together. And so he puts his shroud on, and then they go to planet Earth and they play it out. And what do you think happens? I mean, the book doesn't go on, but you know what it is. His best friend is going to be a perpetrator of some kind. His best friend, his soulmate in the realm of ever expanding good, has agreed to play the role of some kind of perpetrator that will awaken the little soul to his true nature of love and forgiveness. It's a beautiful story.
That is really beautiful. And it seems that in a sense that we've taken on these roles, and like you said, in the story, to have experience different things. Do you feel like it was meant to be more in the spirit as children experience, like with play, the spirit of play? Or do you feel like we've taken on these roles a little bit too seriously, so they become to be, we get really identified? Because living in the city, one day I'm taking the subway and I'm looking at all the adults in a subway car, and they have their briefcase and going to work. And the thought just came, just a feeling that they all appear to me, they all look like kids pretending to be adults. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They all look like they just took, when you're a kid, sometimes you put on your dad's shoes or your mom's shoes and you pretend to be an adult, you pretend to be serious. And that's the feeling I got, is that there's this innocence there. There's this childlike quality that almost, because they took on the role so seriously, it has manifested this outward world, this, even their appearance took on this manifestation of what the seriousness that they took on this role. I don't know if that makes sense. But
a little bit. I mean, I certainly hear what you're saying, that you caught a glimpse of reality and you saw the innate purity and the innate innocence that you are in the individuals in the subway car. And we ask ourselves, one of the things that comes up a lot when I'm teaching classes is people that are going through any kind of struggle, if they're in any kind of, experience of lack or limitation or struggle, they say, why would we come here? This is awful. Why would we even bother to do this? And the truth is, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. This is a gift to be in the body, to have the experience of this little bit of contrast and the experience of the Mother Earth being on Gaia Earth. And it is a gift. It is a gift. And because it is a crash course in learning. We learn very quickly here how we can learn very quickly, I may say, how important it is that we come into a congruency of what we say, what we believe, how we act. And there's a little bit of gap in the third dimension in a body between a thought and immediate manifestation. And that gap is a gift. But some people take it very seriously and get caught up maybe in a seriousness because they're suffering. But if we can remember what the Buddha says about suffering, suffering is in the mind. Suffering is not in the body, it's in the mind. So everything we perceive, whether it's innocence or seriousness or atrocity, it's all a projection of what is inside of us. And that goes for individually and collectively. And that's what shadow work is all about.
So that gap, that's an interesting way to put it. So are you saying that this gap that we have in the third dimension, that we may look at as a sort of punishment is actually a almost like a safety thing, like a filter that gives us, or else we would manifest things that could be not so nice, so we have this filter there. Am I understanding it
Yeah,
correctly?
that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Yes. And that's the gift. And this is the playground, the truth is your life is precious. Life is precious. And that breath that connects us with life is precious. And so we want to use every minute that we can, always in an attempt to awaken and to become more congruent in ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to look out at the world and see the incongruency and to see the hypocrisy and to see the atrocity and the suffering. But the truth is, if the principles are true, that there's only one power and that it's everywhere in its fullness, and it's always creating out of itself, and it does not contradict itself, and it only knows its own name and nature, then if I am looking out and seeing of anything other than the splendor and the grace and the glory of God, then I am looking out with my eyeballs and with my own things that I've repressed and denied inside of myself.
Yeah.
Sorry, the dog is
No, that's okay. I think that's a good segue into the topic. The title is Embracing the Shadow, but we're going to talk about shadow work. So first of all, for people that might not know what the shadow side is, can you talk a little bit about that?
The shadow is that which we have denied in ourselves. So any kind, it's not, I hate to make it sort of scary and demonic and evil, but because shadow work really does need to be embraced. I noticed that's what you called the conversation, embracing the shadow. Because that's essentially what is the shadow is everything that an individual has denied in their own self. And it's interesting. The word demon comes from the word daemon, spelled a little differently, D-A-E. And that word is, we all have our own daemon. It is our innate soul self. And when we cut ourselves off from it and deny it and push it away, then it becomes the demon. Then it becomes the inner monsters that we project out onto basically humanity, the other parts of humanity.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that going on, and I could just speak, from my own experience. It's been a long process for me. So what would you say the importance of making the shadow? Why is it important to make the shadow conscious? And I guess it's a two-part question. So we see that it's important, and then there's the step to learning how to face it, which probably takes a lot of help and some inner courage. And then there is the person that isn't aware of it. There's no desire to even look. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So if we don't look at our own individualized shadow self, if we don't embrace our own shadow, if we don't turn into the dark and look into the mirror of darkness at what is not beautiful inside of us, then this world, this paradigm that's dying, actually, the death throes, it will continue. It will continue, and it'll outpicture as that greed and violence and taking advantage of, you know, the innocent, and death, disease, all of that. That's what will happen, and it'll happen, you know, individually and collectively. I'll never forget when I first had my baby, you know, taking some parenting classes, and it was a really different kind of parenting class that made it all about the parent, and that the child is born perfect. Children are born perfect. And then it is the parent's unhealed shadow that gets projected onto the child. And you can always separate the heavy lifters to those that don't want to look if you have the gift of being a parent or looking at parenting, and how if the parent is generally making the child the identified problem or the identified patient instead of themselves, then that is an individual that doesn't want to look at their own shadow. And I noticed that with me. I mean, and it's with everything. Like, I can remember my child learning how to walk, and when he would fall, he would hit the floor. He would rage at the floor for falling, and thinking, where did that come from? I mean, he was 10 months old. Where did he get into this blame and shame and, you know, deflecting because he fell? He was learning how to walk. Where was his own compassion for himself or his ability to laugh at himself? And I had to look. I had to look at me, at my own, you know, self-criticism and these, you know, my own self-judgment and the own standards, because somewhere he must have picked up on them on the field, in my own field. He picked up on them. And then, you know, he was demonstrating what I had not dealt with, which was my own perfectionism or sense of, you know, judgment, or my, how hard I am on myself. So that's a great example.
Yeah, and I think many of us, you know, I beat myself up. I'm a little bit better. It's been a long process, but I was so hard on myself about every little thing. And you know, that's
one of the most powerful things that I learned, I guess probably in early 2000s, was about a Hawaiian shaman named Dr. Hulen, Ilhiyako Hulen. He is a psychiatrist, and he was hired. If you Google it, there's a beautiful story. He teaches the ancient Hawaiian shamanic practice of Ho'oponopono. And he is a psychiatrist, and he was hired by the state institution on the Big Island of Hawaii to come. And he only agreed to do it if he could do it his way. And so he went, he became the attending psychiatrist for this state hospital. It was the worst state hospital in the world, I guess. I mean, it was filled with the most horrendous of criminals. It had really low staff. And you know, most people were just tied down, and it was awful. And so he agreed to take the job if he could do it his way. And so he sat in his office every day, and he held the case files for each of the patients. And he just did his shamanic healing practice, Ho'oponopono, which is taking 100% responsibility for his perception. And the practice is that he would look at the names of his patients, and he would say, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And what he was essentially saying was, and this was just to their names, he never once saw a patient. And basically what he was saying is, I am sorry that I am perceiving you this way. Please forgive me for doing that. Thank you for reminding me that we live in an eternal realm of ever expanding good. I love you, which of course is the healing balm. And in a certain amount of time, patients that were heavily medicated with Thorazine or, restricted, tied down, and straitjackets, they began to walk freely and be less medicated. The staff improved, the whole morale improved until eventually there weren't enough patients for the staff and the whole entire institution was shut down.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And so that's the literalness that we're talking about here. When we talk about owning our perception for everything we perceive.
Yeah, and I have that experience quite often when I look at someone and I find myself judging, or they're this way, they're that way. It never sits right with me. So I have to take some time, sit down, look within, and notice that that's happening within myself. It's not out there. And maybe we could go a little bit into a lot of these, this way that we've learned to deflect from the shadow side, and it seems very tied into, very much a part of our survival mechanism. Because I mean, for me, speaking from my own experience, it hasn't been so easy just to say, okay, that's the shadow side. I'm going to let it expose it, let it be conscious. But there is like a gripping sensation sometimes in the body. For me, I usually get it in the diaphragm. And, my personal thing that I've been, and I've gotten better with, but it's the feeling of not being good enough. So the blame, and I find that when I lash out in anger or any of these things, a lot of times underneath that, when I really go back and I really look at it, there's this feeling of I don't feel good enough, and with that feeling, there's also a resistance, like, no, don't feel that not good enough feeling, because there's a judgment. I'm not sure exactly where that came from, or how that was instilled, but then it's, I can't say that it's totally, that it has totally gone away. I'm able to put attention on it and be with it and go deep into it. And at some points I feel a release of it, or I start to see it as not as an enemy, more of just an energy with a certain flavor, but it still comes up, so I don't know if this is just, do you think that while we are human, these things will always be there? And is it more about becoming friends with them and relaxing with them more than totally having an expectation that they will be completely gone?
Well, I think for sure it's always important to remember that what we resist persists. And that is the nature of this virus. It's a virus of the mind. The Native Americans actually identified it as an entity and called it Wetiko, Weitko. Paul Levy has an excellent book called Dispelling Wetiko and the Curse of Evil. And so it's important to what you were saying is really important to do. And that is, whenever there's anything that's unsavory that we become aware of in ourselves, whether it's we notice something that we're not very proud of operating, or grief or guilt or whatever it is so important to feel it, to stop and close the eyes and allow it to just be. The minute the mind goes into past and future, then we had taken ourselves out of allowing the full integration in our body. And integration is the key to becoming the light of the world. And one of the things you said was, is that what this is to be a human? The truth is, we are infinite beings of eternal light. We live in an eternal realm. We don't live in our bodies. Our bodies live in us. Our bodies, you know, there's this infinite eternal field of consciousness. And then there's this one little bandwidth of experience called the bio bodysuit and the third dimension that most of humanity is zeroed in on. And that's their limited amount of their experience of themselves. And so everything is asking us to break out of that shell of just having that one limited experience of being your body, of being your identity, of being your personality, of being a mother or a father or whatever, this person or that person, and to get a bigger, broader view of things, of yourself, essentially. Because when we can come into an awareness of that part of us that's never been hurt, that's never been insulted or abandoned or betrayed, then we have become part of that Christ consciousness, that light consciousness. And that's the beneficial presence that we are on this planet. And that is what's happening right now. The world is shifting, which is why this old paradigm is coming up of scarcity and not enoughness, and, you know, a pandemic, and, you know, race, you know, all this stuff that's coming up, civil unrest, and, you know, the banking cartels and all of it. It's all because it's dying. It will die. It's just a matter of basically how quickly. And that's going to be dependent upon you and me.
So would you say that we're moving into, it sounds like we're living from a place of contrast and polarity, the way that it is now. And is it that we're shifting to a more living from compassion and cooperation and love?
Yes. I mean, to put it in our individual lives, we have to bring it into home. All these ideas are great and lofty, and they're easy to spiritually bypass our own shadow and our own fear and our own grief. And so we have to bring it home. And we start by taking 100% responsibility for our perception. And if we can begin to look out at the world and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I was perceiving you this way. Please forgive me for doing that. Thank you. I love you. And that's really important to do for the self. I mean, that was one of the things my teacher, Dr. Hugh Lin, always taught, is you have to do your cleaning work, he called it, on yourself. So that you are forgiving yourself for being limited in your perception and not seeing the face of luminosity in every being. That's what's being called forth. Self-forgiveness, self-appreciation, self-love, self-compassion. When we can really have that for ourselves, then we don't project it out onto the world, that the world is doing something to us.
So how do we get to that self-acceptance and that self-love? And we talked a little bit about not resisting, you know, maybe that's part of where that compassion can come from. You know, when I'm able to sit with myself and say, okay, I'm feeling nervous and feeling it fully, and you know, being with the emotion and the physical sensation. And so are there certain practices that you would suggest, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is what shadow work is seeing, you know, the unsavory part of us, and then forgiving ourselves. And just to speak from experience, the first time I guess really started doing it was 20 something years ago, when I discovered the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got to step 4, which is to take a personal moral inventory. And in this step, I was allowed to write down every single anger and slight that had ever happened to me. And part of that process, though, after this long list of injustices, was my part in it. Having to look at, well, what was my part in that? And I remember getting really tripped up. I was only 20 something at the time, and I certainly hadn't done as much inner work on myself as I have at this point, being 50 something. But I was really confused at that point, because I had had a really rough childhood. Some things had happened. There was some bad actors in my life, and I couldn't figure out what my role in that was, because I was a child. And I realized that my role in that was that I believed a lie that I either told myself or somehow picked up from somewhere, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't pure, that I wasn't innocent, that I wasn't the splendor and the glory and the beauty of God. And I bought it. I hook, line, and sinker, and I walked my life in that lie. And so I just want to say how powerful those steps are. If your listeners haven't discovered the 12 steps, there are so many different groups. You know, there's adult children of alcoholics, there's overeaters, there's sex and love addiction, there's Al-Anon, there's all kinds of addiction. I mean, you can find something to work these steps, because they are powerful, powerful steps. And what ultimately ends up happening is that you get to the 9th step, which is making an amends. And that list of amends that you have is based upon that first list, at least it was for me, that I made of people that had hurt me. Because I had a part in everything, whether I had retaliated or whether I had inherited and believed a lie as a very young child, or later retaliated. Whatever it was, it all came out of a sense of separation. It all came out of a sense of not enoughness, that I wasn't supported, that I wasn't supplied, that I wasn't safe, and that I was separated from that which created me.
Yeah, the 12 steps resonates with me. You know, I'm a friend of Bill's as well, going on 18 next month. So
congratulations.
Yeah, so I went through. You know, I could relate to that process, going through the 4th and the 9th, and it was a great process. I have found, and I don't know if this is the case with you, is that, although the steps I really love the program, and I really love the step work. The 12 steps are great. I feel like I also needed something to go a little bit deeper that really addresses the stuff going on in the body. Like a lot of it, for me, I'm sure most of us and psychologists say nowadays. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes.
Yeah. So his opinion is that not all traumatized people become addicts, but just about all addicts have had some type of trauma in their life. And he will go even a step further. He thinks most people in the world today have experienced trauma. So, there's like a collective trauma going on. And as we all know, scientists say. And a lot of that trauma is, talk therapy is not going to be enough because it's so much in the body. And that's why I feel like many people, they do all this work on themselves and they really feel discouraged. And this is still coming, they do all this work and then the reaction just grips them. They go into fight, flight, and freeze. And it's so quick because it's so tied into the survival mechanism that they're, the breath shallows and they're in this, why does this keep coming up, And so people, for those type of people, what would you say to someone in that circumstance?
Well, I have my own journey around it all, and it's funny that you mentioned Dr. Gabor Mate, because he works with sacred plant medicine, and I've had an extensive amount of experience working with this medicine as well since about 2012. And you don't have to have plant medicine to do the work either. I'm taking a yoga teacher training class right now, and it's really, I'm really starting to integrate the body. But yes, trauma is stored in the body. The muscle memories are in the muscles, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's a great resource for any of that mind-body healing connection. There comes a point when the mind is running the body, but then there comes a point, if left unchecked, that the body begins to run the mind, and then you're stuck in that cycle. And so with practices that can really help release trauma from the body, somatic experiencing, tapping, body work, you can find body workers that's not like a lovely massage, but it's deep inner tissue, stomping it out of the tissues, sacred plant medicine, anything that's going to cause what has coagulated and relaxed in the body mind to come into consciousness and be released is going to be a powerful healing agent. And that will look a lot like trembling. And I've seen with a lot of participants in our sacred shamanic circles drinking plant medicine, that there's a lot of shaking sometimes. That's trauma being released. I've seen individuals, remember things that they had not remembered since they were a child, coming up through the journey experience, and having to relive a painful experience. And it's tremendously courageous to do any kind of body work like that, anything at all. The yoga, the plant medicine, somatic experiencing, Rolfing, and that deep intermuscular work. Because even though on the surface one is re-experiencing the trauma, that is what we call soul retrieval in the shamanic paradigm. We call that soul retrieval or recapitulation. That's that part when we were traumatized. There is the original breaking off of that part of us because it was so painful to have to integrate at the time, or we were in fight or flight at the time. We were not able to actually integrate what it was and release it and shake it off in that moment. We had to keep going. And so it gets stored. And when you begin to do the healing work to recapitulate, to retrieve those parts of us that broke off and went away, then it requires a tremendous amount of compassion and support. It's very important to be supported. Integration is everything, with anything, not just healing circles with plant medicine, but with anything. Integration of what comes up is the work. And this is, in the dream time, in meditation, when you're cooking dinner and you suddenly have the experience or a memory. It's so important that you take time for yourself and sit down and feel the feelings and let it come up, because to the degree that we disown that trauma, that pain, that shadow self, whatever it is, again, it gets projected out onto the world. And then the world just keeps showing up like it is right now, this paradigm that we're separated, original sin, and there's not enough, and we have to exploit each other in order to survive. That's all a lie. It's all a lie. There's enough on this planet to feed everyone. There's cures that are, we know this. We know that we are more than this.
I'm glad that you brought up integration and support, because I think for anyone listening to this, there are a lot of people out there who are doing ayahuasca and different plant medicine, but I don't know if they're getting the support. The integration is key. Because going through my own experience, I've never done ayahuasca, but I've had my own, let's say, energetic happenings or whatever you want to, they still go on. But I've had really powerful ones where, when they happen really fast and all at once, it could really shake your world. And for me at that time, I was, and I still am working with a teacher who kind of helps to ground me. But that was a very important thing. So I'm just echoing that the integration period is so key, so important to the process. Let's see. I think you talked about the separation, and I think we went over the where that came from. Let's talk a little bit about the collective shadow. So we did talk about as you mentioned, the way that things are with, and I'll go into race a little bit if you don't mind. Maybe talk a little bit about this, because maybe it's a good place, good example of the collective shadow, especially as it's playing out in America, with all of the unsavory things that, now with cell phones, we can't keep it hidden anymore. They're all coming to the surface. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. Well, when we talk about the collective unconscious, it's important for me to always remember that the fundamental principle truth is that there really is only one here. And I don't want myself or any people that are listening to me to think that we can not take responsibility individually by calling something the collective. It is, that is the work of the avatar that we are. If anybody's listening to this, chances are they're an avatar of light, and that is just the bottom line. This is not a coincidence, and it's these individuals that have come to this planet at this time to be the catalysts for this quantum quickening that is happening in humanity, that's trying to take place. And so I just want to say that in advance, that it's important not to continuously take 100% responsibility for anything that is perceived, and not to use that term collective unconsciousness so that I can stay out of it. And so with that said, one of the really important things that is important for me to remember that I will share is what Dr. Hewlin taught me, was that when I'm doing my Ho'oponopono and I'm looking out at the world and I'm I'm looking at a white supremacist kneeling on the neck of a man, say, and he's dying and he's hollering. That I'm not, when I say taking 100% responsibility for it, I'm not saying that I caused that, but I am certainly going to have to take responsibility for what I am perceiving there. And that's where we as individuals do our work to quicken the shift in the collective consciousness. And so that requires each of us to look at our own self. So right now, what's happening is a demonstration. Our theme at Agape Hampton Roads in the month of June was demonstration. And this word means evidence of the divine. It comes from demonstre, means entirely of the divine. Monstre, which is the word monster. The word monster, etymology, comes from this Latin word root monstre, which means a divine omen. And so a demonstration is a divine omen or a divine evidence of God. And that is what is happening, that is what has been happening with these demonstrations on the streets. These are individuals such as you and me that have said, oh, yes, I know what love is. I know what equality is. I know what justice is. And it's not that. And so I am demonstrating to you through this march, through this sign, through me standing in the streets, that I know what it is. And I call it forth and I declare that it is coming into fruition now. That's a demonstration. And that's what we're having in the streets. Of course, you know, there's people that are suffering. There's tremendous amount of grief, tremendous amount of pain. And I'm not disqualifying that at all, but the demonstration is the evidence of the divine. And so does that speak to what you were asking?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I mean, the part about what I'm perceiving, you know, it's so important to, even in that in the situation where, you know, where you see that police officer put the knee on the neck of this man. And, you know, my first reaction to that was pretty much rage. Like, if I could have got into the TV, you know, the computer, it's not TV nowadays, but into the cell phone, you know, I just wanted to grab that person. And then I noticed that, you know, the energy was going towards how horrible of a person this is. And it was all out there. But then there was a knowing that, you know, the attention needed to come back here. And that comes with a little bit of a risk, a little bit of kind of stepping outside of the box, because when society is, and this is, you know, probably another projection, but when society is like, when I say, you know, this person keeps blaming, you know, that I'm blaming that person as well. But, you know, but when there's a movement to you know, post a lot of insults and negativity on social media, you know, there's the bringing to light, you know, awareness of, you know, what's going on. And then there is a kind of, it sometimes leans toward the negative, you know, in terms of the language. And I feel like that's part of the collective unconscious, you know, which is deflecting, because we don't want to feel what's going on within ourselves. And a lot of it is, I didn't really know what to feel. I felt like I would be, a traitor or something, or I would be betraying, a race or something if I didn't get on the bandwagon, and I'm not saying that it's about for me about speaking up against racism. Doesn't have anything to do with that at all. It's more of a inner, looking within and kind of taking a pause, taking a step back. And it felt like, for me, it just felt difficult to take. I felt like I was carried away, and I have a lot of friends and family that were, seemingly to doing the same, so it just felt very, I don't know if I'm, expressing this in a way that's understandable, but
you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of confusion there, and that's what I'm trying to express. It just felt like I need to take a side. That's what it felt like. I need to take a side, and I can see that, with the Democrats and the Republicans, and what I see is that creates more of a division. And so I guess what I'm trying to get to is, perhaps it sounds like what you're saying is that division starts within ourselves. So to that feeling of division, not that there's really any division, but that sense of separation and division begins within the self.
Yes. I'll say this. We have to have a foot in both worlds. We have to, each of us have a foot in time where we are, embracing our identity. I am a white woman. You are a Black man, and then we have to have our foot in eternity. And it is our job, of course, to really keep that foot in eternity. In yoga right now, I'm learning that it's the part of the body that you don't see where you really want to focus your foundation on. It's always that back foot, right? And to me, that's that foot in eternity, because, we're often not aware of it when the adrenaline and cortisol and these fight or flight chemicals are running in our body. But that foot in time is crucial to each of us, because we have to meet people where they are, including ourselves. And so what I want to say about that is that, we each have our own individual roles to play right now in society and in the world. And, your role is very different from my role. Your role, I remember Dr. Michael Beckwith sharing recently in one of the interviews that what he's having to tell his African-American congregation is, self-care, and to, remember who you are, and to remember that that you are not a victim. You've been victimized, but you're not a victim. And then what he's having to tell his white congregation is completely different. And I'm part of that. I'm white. And so what my role is not what you're doing, which you might need to retreat. You might need to be retreating and, more centering or more grounding, turning away from the media, whatever that is. You do that. What is upon white people to do is to dismantle the system that benefits them. So that is not, I'm not going to be able to spend too much time turning away. I mean, I remember matriculating through the practitioner program at Agape and being told, do not watch the news, because I didn't understand the principles. I didn't embody them. I didn't know them. And the news was just sucking me into that fight or flight and that upset and that, that reinforcement of a separated world of sin, disease, fear, lack, loneliness, fear, doubt, worry. And then there came a time when it was time to turn the news on, because the news was like a prayer request. And it was time to look it in the face and be that anchor on the planet that says, I see it. I'm going to take responsibility for how I am perceiving what's happening in the world by going inward right now and doing my own inner work. And as a white woman, you know, during this thing, when I saw George Floyd murdered, you know, it did something to me, and I was changed forever, and I was sort of appalled at myself, because I kept hearing myself say, why haven't you had this since Eric Gardner, you know, or Rodney King? I was in my 20s when Rodney King, I saw that. It wasn't on somebody's cell phone, but it was recorded. And so why now? Why was I suddenly, you know, completely changed because of the George Floyd video? This has been happening for, and I had to look at that, and it was not pretty to have to look at, because, you know, they say that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And your dad, Professor Richardson, in the interview that you did earlier in June, I watched, and he nailed it. He nailed it. And it is when he said that people had to, I don't remember his exact word, but stop caring. They had to disconnect and not actually have a concern for the elephants or the rainforest or whatever, you know, the African-American, you know, American story, that white people, myself included, have had to sort of disassociate, and so that it didn't affect us so much. Otherwise, we wouldn't be okay. I watched this with my own child growing up. You know, we would teach him about the rainforest and this and that. And at some point he was riddled with anxiety and upset because, you know, they're killing animals, they're killing people, they're killing the rainforest. And it was hopeless for him. And so I have a compassion for myself, but I still had to look and see, wow, what was that part of me that just allowed myself to not feel so that I could continue my life? And it is rooted in a belief system of there's not enoughness and survival, because, you know, I grew up, I'm a single mom and I've always had to struggle, and we weren't rich white people, we were poor white people. So, you know, it was all this justification, all this deflection, all this denial to keep myself, you know, in a little paradigm that I too am struggling and there's not enough and I can't afford to, you know, make my life be about anything other than surviving. So it's really deep, hard work, but that's the job of us, is that we have to have a foot in eternity, knowing that there is a part of us that is not our identity, that we are not the bodies we came in as, that these bodies are in us, and that the isness of our being is in an eternal realm. It is in this unified field of infinite light and pure potentiality, that's our true nature. And then we have a foot in time, like the little soul in the sun. We have come here to remember who we are, to awaken, to be a beneficial presence on the planet, to be the bodhisattva on this planet, to help create a world that works for everyone through a new thought and a new idea that love is the only truth, that love is all there is, and it is love that will do the work if we allow it in ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and allowing it within ourselves seems we're going back to that relaxing, the resistance, and picking up on something you talked about, not noticing the elephant in the room, and and these sort of things. And I think even on a scientific level, like the neuroscientist Bulatto, he talks about the brain. We get data, and the brain filters all of this data and just uses what it needs. So there's, which is a tiny bit. Whatever it finds useful, that's what it need. That's what it uses. So that's our brain, and it does that so that it has certainty. And one of the things that come up for me, a lot is, and it's tied, it's so tied into the survival mechanism, is we seek this certainty. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like we know what's going to happen next. We think that if we go from A to B to C, and what Bulatto says is that we need to start by not going to A, because that's the part of where the uncertainty lives, where the mystery lives. And it sounds like maybe another way to say that is that's where the other foot is, in this place of who we are, this place of mystery, and of this place of potentiality. So can you comment a little bit on that?
Well, a lot of people who come into New Thought come because, they saw The Secret. There's that movie called The Secret that Michael Beckwith was in. And they come to New Thought, they come to Agape because they want to have a better life. They want to, change their life structures, more wealth or soulmate love, or, more freedom in their expression, or, and it's wonderful to be able to embrace metaphysics and learn how to take on the laws of the universe. If you change your thinking, you change your life. And that's important to be able to know and harness and use. But there is a bigger game being played, and that is that of the mystic. And what the mystic knows is that it's not just about having life structures in place. It's not just about having everything the way you want it to be, but that it is a world of pure potential, and that nothing can ever be defined in an ever expanding universe. If the caterpillar came to you and said, "I'm dying, please pray for me, I want to be a better caterpillar," and you prayed for that caterpillar to be a better caterpillar, it would never go into the cocoon and liquefy and let the new DNA, the imaginal cells that act like a cancer, to form the body of the butterfly. And so we have to know that in everything we see, there is always something greater trying to birth itself. And that goes for even the most awful thing, whether you were abused as a child, or a murder, or an illness, whatever it is. If the fundamental principle is that it's an expanding universe and everything is always unfolding for the highest good, then everything can be viewed as this is part of what has to be. Just like Dr. King's knew that we had to march and march and march and allow those policemen to just, hose them down off the steps time after time, and let that happen enough and enough and enough, which was terrible. It's horrible. So that finally there could be an awakening in consciousness, with people seeing it on TV saying, "Oh, no, this isn't who we are." And I know that's what happened here in our collective. I mean, it's no small thing that bam, 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 during a pandemic, that the Ahmaud Arbery thing, which happened, I think, in February, but then came out in March during the pandemic is when we found out about it. And then George, and then Christopher Cooper, and then we found out about Breonna Taylor. It all happened at the same time during a pandemic. That, you see, is clearly evidence of divinity at work, happening all at the same time to awaken the collective to an agreement that, yeah, this is not who we are. We are more than this. And it's really the white people, I mean, it's the white people that got woke, hopefully some of them.
Yeah, well, I think we're all on this journey, the awakening together. Let's see. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you feel like you didn't get to discuss?
Yeah. One of the earlier things that really helped me in my shamanic practice was the Course in Miracles. This book, I was given this book at 18 years of age. I had been a pretty hippie-ish spiritual kind of person, but I went to buy a VW van, and the guy sold me the van for $2,000, and he gave me the book. And I didn't understand this book really until I'd had a baby. And one day my baby had a fever, and he was, an infant with a fever. And I went to my study group, and we were reading something, and I said, wait a minute. Are you telling me that I am responsible for my baby's fever? And the leader of the group said, well, you're responsible for the perception. And I remember throwing the book across the room and not touching the course probably for a decade. Until later, I picked it up, and I picked up this other really great book by Gary Renard called The Disappearance of the Universe. And in it, he talks about, a little summary of what forgiveness really is according to the Course in Miracles. And that's what I'll share before I end. And basically what it is you look out at what is upsetting you, whether it's an individual or a dynamic or a scenario or situation, and you say, you're not really out there. If you're not really out there, then I made you up. And so if I made you up, then what I think you are and what you're doing must be in me. Okay, therefore, I am going to forgive myself and you for what actually hasn't happened. And together we are in God, and so it is. And that is the depth of the Course. It's really a dream. And that is what the shaman does, is the shaman, and we're all urban shamans now. The shaman knows that we are all experiencing, it's a holographic universe, and we are all co-dreaming this dream of separation together. And what the shaman does is he or she dreams a new dream. And when enough of us dream this new dream, one in God is a majority. One in truth is. You can have 10,000 people in agreement over a lie, but it's still not the truth. The truth is 2 + 2 is 4. If everyone still agrees that 2 + 2 is 5, it's still not going to do the math to get the rocket ship off the planet. 2 + 2 is 4. One in God is the majority. I'll leave you with that.
That's beautiful. So we've gone almost an hour and a half. So I wanted to leave some time for a prayer or meditation of your choosing.
Okay. Well, we'll just do a little brief meditation, couple of minutes, and then I'll pray for all of us. Do
Okay.
an affirmative prayer. And so, how good it is to just stop in this moment, to take some clearing breaths, close the outer eye, straighten the spine, and breathe. Allowing thoughts to pass like birds in the sky. If they land for a moment, that's okay. Shoo them away and take a breath. And how grateful I am to be in this moment. Grateful for this quality moment, I like to call it, for Ade, for technology, for the shoulders that we stand on, shoulders of unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, of truth. How good it is to come together, two or more gathered in the name and in the nature of what is real. What is real is what is eternal. It does not change. It is ever unfolding, the same yesterday, today, and forever, a non-dual good. It is the only causation, the only power, the only thing happening, the unified field, pure potential, primal force, creative source. To know that it created me out of itself, it created Ade out of itself, it created each and every individual within the sound of my voice out of itself, and it played and displayed, it danced and formed itself into the individualized, pure expression of each and every one of us. To know that there is only one here. How good it is to know this, to affirm it, that there is God, and God is our life, that we each live and move and have our beingness in a realm of ever expanding good where nothing has ever hurt us. We have never been alone. We live in God. That is where we have our beingness. That is who and what we are, infinite pure potential. And so I speak this word for each individual here calling forth a greater God realization, calling forth the mind that was in the great master, Jesus the Christ, the mind that was in the great teacher, Buddha, the mind that is in all of these ascended beings of light, love, and illumination, calling forth the heart of pure forgiveness, the heart of love, the heart of life, knowing that love doeth all works. I speak this word knowing that this power is made available to each individual, and that each individual in the sound of my voice, because they are participating in this moment, that they are available to it, that they are open to it. And it's into this openness that I speak this word, calling forth dynamic abundance, dynamic harmony, dynamic peace, dynamic love and creative expression to fully express and reveal and make itself known to them in ways that they can feel and sense and perceive. I am speaking this word, declaring that all misqualified belief systems and thought patterns, childhood beliefs and emotional addictions, that all of it is cast into the no-thingness from whence it came. There is one power, one cause, one presence, and it is God all good, God all joy, God all love now. That is the reality now, breaking forth, revealing itself as each of us fulfill the destiny of our soul, the divine holy purpose of our soul, to fully embody, to fully self-actualize, to fully remember who and whose we are, the individualized expression of God, and to reveal this, to give each and every other human, seeming other human, permission to step into their oneness, to step in and own their own spiritual authority. I call it forth now. I call forth the law of grace, which is the only law under which we live. We do not live under laws of cause and effect. We come into the Christ consciousness knowing we live our lives under the law of grace. Everything is easy now. That is what I am knowing. That is what I am declaring and decreeing for each and every individual. Everything is easy now. It's easy to let go of what does not serve. It is easy to embrace that which stretches and grows us to an awakening of the destiny of love, the destiny of light, the destiny of illumination. I am so thankful for this living word, knowing that I have spoken it with an authority of one who knows who and whose and where and what she is. Therefore, I know my word is a law unto itself, that I have simply described what is. And I release it. I release this word now, knowing it is returned, fulfilled, outpictured, demonstrated, manifested in form, in ways that matter, because God is good. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Giving me this opportunity and having me. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to also, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, or do you offer any services or anything?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yes. I can be found at Agape Hampton Roads Spiritual Center, We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We are on Twitter, Instagram. We have a website, Agape. You can just Google Agape Hampton Roads, find our website. We are Zooming all of our Sunday services. We offer a 10 a.m. Eastern Time meditation service and then a 10:30 celebration service. And it's all on Zoom right now due to the pandemic. So anybody is welcome. Everybody's welcome. And we have practitioners that offer spiritual counseling. I also offer this. These are professionals that have been trained to work with individuals in a specific way. And you can learn all about that by going to our website.
Great. And I'll post the link to the website.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. So just some closing announcements. Again, this is Guided Meditations and More. My name is Ade Richardson, and today's guest is Reverend Victoria J Thomas. And this is normally an 8 a.m. Eastern Time meditation that we offer daily. And we also have been doing interviews with spiritual teachers, seekers, and just interested people that join us to discuss their experience on their journey. If you want to be notified about the upcoming meditations or interviews or other things that I post on the site, just like the page or follow the page, you'll get the notifications. If you have any questions for me, you can send me a direct message at the inbox. Is there any way that, for someone to contact you, can they?
My email is Rev, R-E-V, Victoria, so there's 2 V's, at Agape, A-G-A-P-E, HRSC.org. Okay,
great. And I'll link that in the description as well. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining, and much love to everyone. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, everyone.